The Sornel family trusted one thing about Xian Horan. He knew exactly how small they expected him to be. At family dinners, the 26-year-old Omega carried documents when the assistants were busy, remembered Darian Sornel's preferred tea, and let his older half-brother Jayan send him back upstairs because his shirt looked too plain beside the guests. Xian never argued. He lowered his eyes, apologized, and gave people the harmless smile they were used to seeing. To the Sornels, he was Darian's inconvenient son from an old affair, allowed to live on the estate because Darian wanted to look responsible. Xian even kept another man's surname. Most people assumed he was ashamed to call himself a Sornel. They were wrong. Horan was the name of the man who had actually raised him. That evening, while Jayan complained about flowers and cameras for his first formal dinner with UNCUT, Xian crossed the reception hall with a tray and quietly switched 2 place cards. The change looked accidental. It placed an outside auditor between 2 finance directors who had been telling different stories about the same foundation transfer. Xian set down the tray beside Jayan and waited. "More ice," Jayan said without looking at him. "Of course." Xian turned away before the corner of his mouth could move. In the service corridor, he texted Neria Voss, the beta who ran Naker House with him. "Seat change done." Neria answered immediately. "Camera ready." "Try to look miserable." Xian put the phone away. Looking miserable was easy. He had practiced for years. His mother Celine had once trusted Darian Sornel's promises. Darian had money, influence, and a talent for making temporary arrangements sound permanent. Xian had been born from that relationship, but Celine had gone back to the man named Horan, the father of her older son Riven. Horan knew Xian was not his biological child and raised him anyway. He taught both boys to ride bicycles, fixed broken toys at the kitchen table, and never separated them by blood. Xian kept his surname because he had already had a father long before Darian decided to acknowledge him. 3 years earlier, a fire tore through a Sornel Group warehouse during an unauthorized private event. Horan ran inside when workers were trapped. He carried one person out, went back for another, and died inside. The official investigation blamed old wiring. Riven did not believe it. He started collecting safety records, then disappeared. Only after that did Darian move Celine and Xian into the Sornel estate, claiming he wanted to protect them. Xian understood the real reason within weeks. Frightened people were easier to watch when they lived behind your gates. So he stayed where Darian wanted him. He became quieter, less capable, easier to order around. At the same time, he built Naker House under another name, a discreet negotiation and intelligence firm that helped people survive powerful companies, bad contracts, and private pressure. Naker also gave Xian access to the kind of information rich families ignored because it came from assistants, drivers, vendors, junior lawyers, and employees they barely noticed. Xian did not need to invent the Sornel sins. He only needed to put the right people in the right rooms and let arrogance do the rest. The room shifted when UNCUT arrived. He was an Alpha 31 heir to Kalis Group, but he did not enter like a man trying to prove it. He was lean rather than huge, dressed in a dark suit, with ash-brown hair and amber hazel eyes that moved through the room slowly enough to make Xian uncomfortable. Jayan brightened at once. Their 30-day public courtship was supposed to strengthen negotiations between Sornel Group and Kalis Group during a major restructuring project. Jayan liked the attention. Darian liked the business leverage. Yurin looked as if he liked neither. "You kept me waiting," Jayan said with a practiced smile. "I considered making it longer," Yurin replied. Jayan laughed. Xian looked down so nobody would see his reaction. Dinner started. 10 minutes later, one finance director corrected the other about a transfer date. The second man snapped that he had approved nothing. The auditor stopped eating and asked one question, then another. Darian's expression remained calm, but his thumb pressed once against his wineglass. Xian knew that habit. Darian only did it when something surprised him. The plan was working. Xian moved toward the sideboard, but Yurin's voice stopped him. "Sit." Xian turned. Jayan frowned. "He doesn't need to." "Xian likes helping," Yurin kept his eyes on Xian. I didn't ask what he likes. The empty chair at the end of the table suddenly felt like a trap. Xian gave the embarrassed smile everyone expected. I'm fine standing. Then stand. Yurin went back to his meal. Xian did not relax. That had not been kindness. Yurin had wanted to see how Xian reacted when someone offered him more status than the family normally allowed. After dinner, several guests gathered in the library around an unfinished chess game. Jayan noticed Xian bringing coffee and smirked. You should ask him. He knows all kinds of useless things. Xian set down the cups. Not chess. You watched Riven play all the time. Watching isn't playing. Yurin touched the black rook. One move. Refusing would look stranger than agreeing. Xian sat opposite him and scanned the position. Yurin moved a bishop and left a rook exposed. Too exposed. Any beginner who knew the basic value of the pieces would take it immediately. Xian almost reached for the knight, then stopped. The rook was bait. Taking it opened a diagonal toward his king. He moved a pawn instead. Yurin looked at the board, then directly at him. Beginners take the free piece. Jayan rolled his eyes. He got lucky. Yurin did not look away from Xian. He didn't. Xian forced a confused expression. Didn't what? Nothing. The slight curve at Yurin's mouth told him enough. He had been tested and he had failed by being too careful. Xian stepped onto the terrace later, phone in hand. Neria had already confirmed that the auditor wanted the foundation records. Yurin followed him outside. You moved the finance directors, he said. Xian kept looking at the garden. Maybe the staff made a mistake. The staff didn't. You seem very interested in place cards. I become interested when a seating mistake makes two men contradict each other in front of an auditor. Xian finally dropped the harmless expression. Yurin's eyes sharpened with satisfaction. There you are. Xian hated how quickly those words got under his skin. If you're going to accuse me, do it. I'm going to save you 3 weeks. Yurin explained that the disputed money had been rerouted through a logistics subsidiary. The auditor needed vendor reconciliation files, not the main foundation ledger. Xian studied him. Why help? I didn't say I was helping you. Then who? Myself. That answer Xian believed. He sent Neria the correction. Within 2 days, the auditor found the first real inconsistency. Xian also learned something more dangerous. Yurin had already been investigating Sornal Group before the courtship began. The public relationship with Jayan gave him legal access to due diligence material without forcing him to sneak through the front door. Xian should have been irritated by the overlap. Instead, he felt a spark of competition. He had spent years surrounded by people who saw only the quiet Omega Darien kept on the edge of the family. Yurin had needed one dinner and one chess move to question the entire performance. The next morning, Celine found Xian in the breakfast room and pushed a plate toward him. Eat before Jayan finds another job for you. Her voice was gentle, tired in the way it had become after years of trying to keep peace in a house that never gave it back. Xian sat. On the mantel behind her was a Sornal family photograph taken before he and Celine moved in. Jayan stood beside Darien in the center. Xian did not mind being absent. He had never wanted a place in that picture. He wanted the truth about the man whose photograph his mother still kept hidden in her bedroom, and he wanted to know what had happened to Riven after he started asking the same questions. By noon, Xian was at Naker House, a narrow office above a design studio across town. Neria met him with coffee and a raised eyebrow. Your alpha is good. Not my alpha. Your problem, then? Closer. She slid the new vendor records toward him. Someone had accessed part of the same chain months before Naker did. Xian was still reading when Neria's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then handed it over. A photograph showed Naker House's side entrance. It had been taken less than 10 minutes earlier. Under the image was one message from an unknown number. Your disguise needs work. Xian stared at it, then walked to the window. Across the street, a dark car pulled away from the curb. He could not see the passenger clearly, but he did not need to. Neria leaned beside him. Should I be worried that you're smiling? Xian locked the phone. For the first time since Riven vanished, someone had reached the board before Xian expected him to. No, he said. Not yet. Yurin appeared at Naker House the next morning carrying 2 coffees and no apology. Naria led him upstairs before Xian could stop her. He brought the bitter one you like, she said. That is not a security policy. It is before 9. Yurin set the cup on Xian's desk. Good morning. No. Still angry about the photograph? I'm deciding whether trespassing is more annoying than surveillance. I stayed on the sidewalk. Xian pushed the coffee away. Yurin pushed it back. You are investigating Sornel. So am I. We can waste time trying to block each other, or we can exchange what neither of us has. Xian looked at him for several seconds. Rules. Yurin took out a small notebook as if he had expected that answer. No innocent people used as collateral. No exposure of Naker staff. No interference without warning unless immediate harm was involved. No lying about evidence. Xian added one more. No deciding what is best for me. Yurin's expression barely changed. Specific. Necessary. They shook on it anyway. Their partnership never looked like one in public. Yurin continued appearing beside Jayan at dinners and investor events. Xian continued carrying folders for his half-brother and pretending not to understand the business conversations around him. In private, they exchanged files and arguments. Yurin had corporate access Xian could never obtain cleanly. Xian had people who heard things board members never put in writing. Both men kept testing the limits. Xian once gave Yurin a list with 1 false appointment buried among 4 real ones. Yurin circled the false one before finishing his coffee. Yurin once handed Xian a redacted contract. Xian identified the missing company from the page numbers and tax structure. Naria watched them for 2 weeks and finally said, You know normal flirting is cheaper. Xian told her to leave the room. Yurin asked if she had more observations. The first time Xian saw Yurin give up useful information, there was no audience. A junior compliance employee agreed to meet them but froze when Yurin asked about protected medical files connected to Sornel's scent regulation program. The employee's hands shook. I can tell you what I saw, but I can't send patient records. I could lose my license. Yurin closed his laptop. Then don't. Xian looked at him. The files could have shortened their search by weeks. We can find another route, Yurin said. Not through him. Later. In the elevator. Xian asked, You always walk away that easily? From evidence someone has to destroy himself to give me? Yes. That's inconvenient. So are ethics. Xian almost laughed. It was the first time he understood that Yurin's restraint was not a performance for him. A week later, Xian entered Yurin's private office without permission. He had seen a familiar Sornel file on Yurin's desk during their last meeting, and Yurin had refused to explain where it came from. Xian found the folder in the second drawer. Before he could open it, voices sounded outside. Darien. Jayan. There was no time to cross the room. Xian dropped beneath the wide desk just as the door opened. Yurin came in first, saw the chair slightly moved, and looked down. Their eyes met. Xian held the folder against his chest. Yurin's face remained perfectly calm. He sat, lowered one hand beside his knee, and raised a finger to his lips. Shoo! Xian narrowed his eyes. Jayan took the chair opposite the desk. Darien stayed standing. They had come to discuss a vendor review and a set of warehouse records that should have been routine. They were not. Jayan said one date. Darien corrected him too quickly. Then Jayan mentioned a storage archive that had supposedly been destroyed 3 years earlier. Under the desk, Xian went completely still. Yurin asked neutral questions, never looking down again. Darien shut the conversation down and warned Jayan not to discuss old records outside the family. 5 minutes later they left. Xian crawled out, straightened his shirt, and held up the folder. Next time, don't steal my evidence. Yurin leaned back. Next time, use the door. Your door was watched. And yet you made it under my desk. You sound impressed. Concerned. Xian walked out with the folder. Only after he left did Yuren realize the pages inside were copies Xian already possessed. The real purpose had been the conversation. Xian had deliberately entered when he knew Darien and Jayan were due upstairs, forcing Yuren to hear the exchange himself. That evening, Yuren sent one message. So that's what you were doing. Xian replied with a photograph of a chess pawn lying on its side. Neria read over his shoulder. Was that flirting? No, you're both hopeless. Xian did not answer. Their next useful lead took them to a botanical conservatory owned by the Kalis Foundation. Old property and insurance archives had been moved into storage beneath the administrative wing, and one warehouse policy appeared in both Kalis and Sornel records. They worked after public hours with permission from the facility manager. No emergency. No locked doors. Just shelves, dust, and several hours of reading. Near midnight, Yuren placed a cup beside Xian without interrupting him. Xian took a drink and paused. Bitter black tea, no sugar. You remembered. Yes. Why? Yuren kept reading. I remember things I care about. Xian looked at him longer than necessary. Yuren finally glanced up. Problem? You say things like that too casually. Would you prefer a warning first? I'd prefer you stop. No, Xian returned to the files, but the warmth in his face had nothing to do with the tea. The partnership might have become easier if Jayan had truly been as shallow as Xian pretended to believe. He was not. Xian began noticing small changes. Jayan stopped complaining about minor leaks and started asking exactly when they occurred. He remembered figures he usually claimed were boring. During one dinner, he deliberately gave a wrong revenue number, then watched to see who corrected him. Xian recognized the trap too late. 2 days later, Naker received a document suggesting that one Sornel subsidiary had paid an illegal settlement to a former patch testing contractor. The information looked authentic. It was designed to look authentic. Xian moved fast. Too fast. Neria contacted the contractor. A Naker employee arranged a meeting. By the time Xian discovered the payment trail had been altered, Jayan's people had already documented the contact. If the operation continued, Naker could be accused of pressuring a witness with false information. Xian canceled everything, pulled his employee out, and spent the next 6 hours cleaning up the damage. He hated the feeling more than losing money. Someone under him had almost taken the fall for his impatience. Yuren arrived after dark. Xian expected a lecture. Instead, Yuren placed a secure access card on the table. Clean archive. Independent copies. You could have given me this yesterday. Yesterday you didn't know you needed it. You knew the document might be false. I suspected. Xian's temper rose. And you let me walk into it? You told me not to decide what was best for you. The answer hit because it was partly fair. Yuren continued quieter. I'm not rescuing you from every bad move, Xian, but I won't let one mistake destroy your people. Use the archive. Xian looked at the card. You enjoy being right. Less than you think. Liar. Occasionally. Xian took the card. The clean archive exposed something larger. For nearly 2 years, someone had been sending Yuren fragments of the same Sornel records Naker was chasing. Safety reports, vendor lists, internal complaints, portions of the warehouse file. The source never used a name. Only one letter appeared at the bottom of each message. Xian stared at the screen. Riven used to mark his chess notes with the same compact R and a short horizontal stroke. It was a habit from school. Where did you get these? Encrypted delivery. Who is R? Yuren did not answer. Xian turned slowly. You know. I know more than I did when the messages started. Is my brother alive? Silence. Xian's chair scraped back. Yuren. Yes. The word emptied the room. Xian's pulse slammed once against his throat. Where is he? I can't tell you. You just told me he's alive. Because you recognized him. His location is protected. How long? Yuren's jaw tightened. Xian. How long have you known? 6 months. Xian stood so still that even his scent flattened. 6 months of searching. 6 months of his mother waking at night when an unknown number called. 6 months of urine sitting across from him, drinking his tea, trading information, saying nothing. You broke the rule. Riven asked me to. You broke it. His safety depended on. Get out. Urine did not move. I can explain. Not tonight. Xian took the access card from his pocket and dropped it on the table between them. Whatever this was, it's over. Urine looked at the card, then at him. For once, he had no clever answer. He left without touching the coffee Neria had placed outside the door. Xian waited until the elevator closed before his hands began to shake. Riven came to Naker House the next afternoon. Xian was alone in the conference room when the door opened. For 1 second, he did not move. His brother looked older, thinner through the face, with shorter hair and a scar near his left temple that had not been there 3 years earlier. But it was Riven. Same uneven smile. Same habit of pressing his tongue against the inside of his cheek when he was nervous. Xian crossed the room and hit him once in the shoulder before pulling him into a hard embrace. You idiot. Riven held on. Fair. Xian pushed him back. Mom thinks you're dead half the time. I know. You know? Anger returned as quickly as relief. Then explain. Riven had disappeared after someone tried to force his car off the road 2 weeks into his investigation. He survived, contacted a lawyer, and entered a protected witness program connected to a broader regulatory case. The warehouse fire had exposed more than bad wiring. Sornal Group had been developing a scent regulation patch designed to help alphas and omegas stabilize scent output and cycle-related symptoms during work and travel. Early testing showed a serious defect. Some users experienced unstable scent response, false cycle readings, and temporary endocrine disruption. Senior executives hid the data because a failed launch would cost the company a major licensing deal. The warehouse contained backup testing records. During the unauthorized event, safety systems were disabled to hide the gathering. The fire exposed both problems at once. Horan died trying to save workers while company staff were already discussing which files had to disappear. Riven had spent 3 years helping regulators rebuild that evidence chain. I contacted Urine because Kalis had independent copies from an old insurance partnership, he said. At first he didn't know who I was. Later he figured it out. Xian's jaw tightened. And you told him not to tell me? Yes. Why? Because people were still being moved into protection. If you knew I was alive, you would have come looking. You don't know that. Riven gave him a flat look. I grew up with you. Xian looked away. That was the problem. Riven was probably right. Understanding the reason did not erase the 6 months Urine had kept the truth from him, but it changed the shape of the betrayal. The bigger shock came from the old message logs Riven brought. Xian had spent years believing Darien ordered the original cover-up. Darien had protected it, but he had not started it. Jayan had. At 25, Jayan discovered that the scent patch trial data could destroy his path to succession. After the fire, he contacted 2 executives before investigators reached the warehouse and warned them that backup files still existed. They erased what they could. Darien learned what Jayan had done later. Instead of turning him in, he used lawyers, settlements, and family influence to keep the scandal buried. Jayan had spent years acting bored whenever the warehouse was mentioned because everyone, including Xian, found it easier to underestimate a spoiled heir. That's why he caught Naker, Xian said. Riven nodded. He's not smarter than you. He just finally realized someone was hunting him. Xian stared at the old logs. I treated him like a predictable piece. And he moved. Xian almost smiled despite himself. You sound like Urine. Don't punish me for that. Jayan struck before Xian could decide the next move. By evening, edited files began circulating among Sornal Council and several media contacts. They made Naker House look like an illegal blackmail network that stole confidential data and pressured employees. One of Xian's contractors was called for questioning. Another lost access to a client system. Neria slammed a folder onto Xian's desk. If this spreads, our people become the story. Xian looked at the names on the page. For years, revenge had justified almost every risk he took himself. It did not justify sacrificing people who trusted him. Freeze all offensive work, he said. Neria blinked. Including Founders Night? Everything. Move the sensitive files to council. Nobody contacts Sornel without approval. Xian, if we stop now, then we stop. Yuren was waiting in the hallway when Xian left the conference room. Good, he said. Xian's temper flared. Choose your next word carefully. You chose them over winning. Of course I did. 3 years ago, I'm not sure you would have. Xian stepped closer. You don't get to turn this into a lesson after what you did. I know. There was no defense in Yuren's voice this time. Then why are you here? Yuren held out a drive. Everything. What? Every file Riven sent me. Every source I can legally share. Every Kalis archive connection. No redactions. Xian did not take it. What's the price? None. There is always a price with you. Not this time. They went into the empty conference room. Yuren placed the drive on the table and stayed standing. I told myself I was protecting Riven's operation. That part was true. I also decided you were safer not knowing, and I never gave you the choice. That part was mine. Xian watched him. You thought you knew better. Yes. You usually do. That doesn't give me the right. The answer was simple enough to hurt. Yuren pushed the drive toward him. If you never trust me again, use the files anyway. Finish this. I won't hold your investigation hostage to whatever happens between us. For weeks, Xian had been waiting for an argument clever enough to justify the lie. Yuren did the one thing Xian had not expected. He gave up control. Xian picked up the drive, then set it down again. You're infuriating. I've been told. Mostly by me. Mostly. Xian grabbed the front of Yuren's shirt and kissed him. The kiss was not gentle, but it was brief enough to leave both of them surprised by the silence after it. Yuren did not chase him when Xian pulled back. He only searched Xian's face. Was that anger? Partly. Should I be worried? Constantly. The tension broke just enough for Xian to breathe. They did not go to bed because of one kiss. They spent the next several hours rebuilding the plan for Founders Night. Riven's evidence, the Kalis archive, and Naker's surviving records finally lined up. Jayan had created the first deletion order. Darien had signed later settlements. A separate regulator already had enough to open the door once the original archive appeared. Near midnight, Yuren asked if Xian wanted a car home. Xian looked at him, then at the clear city lights beyond the window. I'm not going home. Yuren said nothing for a moment. Are you sure? Yes. This time the answer belonged entirely to Xian. Later, behind a closed door away from Naker's offices, they let the argument and restraint of the last weeks finally soften into intimacy. The moment stayed slow and deliberate rather than driven by heat. Yuren stopped when the question of marking came up, and Xian told him clearly that he was not ready for a permanent mating mark while the revenge was still unfinished. Yuren accepted it without bargaining. They chose a temporary scent bond instead, something intimate enough to mean trust but not ownership. For Xian, that choice mattered more than any instinctive pull between Alpha and Omega. He stayed because he wanted Yuren, and Yuren treated that decision as something to protect, not claim. Want the full Patreon version? It includes the uncensored 18+ scene, extended chemistry, extra relationship moments, and story details cut from YouTube. Link in the description. Mourning did not magically solve them. Xian still thought Yuren had been wrong to hide Riven. Yuren still thought Xian treated personal safety like an optional expense. But when they returned to Naker House, they moved through the final plan without the old need to win every sentence. Neria took one look at them and sighed. I don't want details. Good, Xian said. I wasn't offering any. Yuren put a folder on the table. Founders Night guest list. Neria looked between them. That is somehow worse. The final strategy was simple enough to survive pressure. Jayan would almost certainly expose Naker first. Xian would not deny it. Riven would appear only after Jayan committed publicly to the accusation. Regulators would already be inside the venue. Yuren's role was deliberately limited. He would secure access, protect the witnesses, and keep Kalis lawyers from blocking the release. He would not stand on stage beside Xian. When Yuren asked if Xian was certain, Xian closed the folder. "It's our fight now." Yuren waited. Xian added, "But I'm still leading." A small smile appeared. "Fair enough." Founders' Night filled the Sornal headquarters with investors, reporters, regulators invited under routine compliance agreements, and enough cameras to make Jayan feel safe. The event was supposed to announce him as Darian's successor and present the next generation of the scent regulation patch. Xian arrived with Celine and took a seat several rows from the stage. For once, he did not dress down. His suit was clean and sharp, his copper-brown hair pushed back from his face, and he made no effort to look smaller when people stared. Jayan noticed immediately. Yuren stood with the Kalis delegation on the opposite side of the room. Their eyes met once. Yuren gave no signal. He did not need to. Darian opened the event with a short speech about continuity. Then Jayan stepped forward. He was composed again, polished enough that nobody watching would guess he had spent the previous week feeding accusations to lawyers and reporters. "Before we discuss the future," he said, "there is an internal matter our shareholders deserve to understand." The main screen changed. Naker House's logo appeared behind him. Then photographs of Xian entering the office, fragments of messages, payments to consultants, and edited extracts from internal investigations. A murmur spread through the room. Jayan looked directly at Xian. "For years, a member of our own family has operated a private network designed to obtain confidential information, manipulate employees, and damage Sornal Group. That person is Xian Horan." Celine's fingers tightened around her bag. Xian touched her hand once. "Stay here." He stood before anyone could order him to. Reporters turned. Jayan's mouth almost curved. This was the picture he wanted. The tolerated illegitimate Omega exposed in front of the family that had fed him. Xian walked toward the stage. Darian said nothing. "Is Naker House yours?" Jayan asked. "Yes." The answer cut through the room more effectively than a denial. "Did you investigate Sornal Group?" "Yes." "Did you arrange contacts with employees and contractors?" "Yes." Jayan spread one hand. "Then perhaps you would like to explain why anyone should believe your accusations now." Xian stopped at the edge of the stage. "I have a better question." The screen behind Jayan changed again. Not because Jayan ordered it. Naria had control of the secondary presentation feed. A list of missing archive numbers appeared. "If everything I found was fabricated," Xian said, "why did Sornal Group spend 4 years deleting the originals?" The room went quiet. Jayan glanced toward the technical booth. Xian continued before he could interrupt. He did not tell a long story. He gave dates. The warehouse fire. The first deleted safety reports. The falsified scent patch testing summaries. The payments that followed. Then the doors at the side of the hall opened. Riven walked in. Celine made a sound behind Xian, half breath and half sob, even though she had known he would be there. Most of the room had not. Cameras swung toward him. Riven was followed by an independent auditor, 2 former Sornal employees, and representatives from the regulatory team already assigned to the patch case. Jayan's face lost color for the first time. "This is theater," he said. "No," Riven answered. "The theater was pretending I disappeared because I was unstable." He held up a sealed evidence packet. "I disappeared because someone tried to stop me from bringing this forward." The regulator took over from there. The evidence did not depend on Xian's word. Independent backups matched Naker's records. Insurance copies confirmed the warehouse files existed before the fire. Testing data showed adverse reactions had been removed from internal summaries. One former employee confirmed that Jayan had contacted executives before investigators secured the building. Another produced a preserved message header tied to the deletion order. Jayan recovered enough to attack. And all of these people were found through Naker, he said. A network run by a man with an obvious personal grudge. Some were, Xian said. Which is why independent investigators verified them before tonight. Jayan turned to Darien. End this. It was the first openly desperate thing he had done. Darien remained near the podium, one hand resting on the wood. Father. Darien looked older than he had a week earlier. There is another archive. Jayan froze. Xian did too. This was not part of the plan. Darien reached inside his jacket and removed a small encrypted drive. Years ago, he had kept one copy of the warehouse records as insurance against the very executives he helped protect. It was not an act of conscience. It was leverage. Jayan stared at the drive. You said it was destroyed. I said the company copy was destroyed. Then keep it. No, Jayan's voice dropped. Do you understand what is on that? Yes. Darien looked at the regulator. It contains the original internal messages, settlement instructions, and later legal approvals. Xian understood immediately. The archive would prove Jayan started the deletion. It would also prove Darien discovered the truth and chose to continue the cover-up. Jayan stepped closer. You hand that over, you implicate yourself. I know. For him. He pointed at Xian. Darien's eyes finally moved toward Celine. Earlier that afternoon, Neria had found one last part of Jayan's plan. Forged transfers designed to make Celine look like the financial bridge between Naker and stolen Sornal funds. Jayan had been prepared to sacrifice her with Xian. Darien had protected Jayan for years, but even his hypocrisy had a limit. No, Darien said. I'm telling the truth too late. He handed the drive to the regulator. Nothing exploded. Nobody was dragged away in dramatic handcuffs before the cameras. The fall of a powerful company looked less cinematic and more final. Regulators secured devices and separated the principal witnesses. The board suspended Jayan and Darien before midnight. The product launch was frozen. Jayan was informed that he could not leave with company electronics while investigators reviewed the new archive. On his way out of the hall, he stopped beside Xian. You always wanted what I had. Xian shook his head. That's the part you never understood. Jayan stared at him. Then what did you want? Xian looked toward Riven and Celine. What you took. Jayan had no answer. The legal cases took months. The Sornal Empire did not vanish overnight, which made the outcome more real. The patch program went under independent review. Former test participants and warehouse workers filed claims. Several executives cooperated once the preserved archive made denial pointless. Darien lost control of the board and faced his own legal consequences. Jayan's role in the deletion and obstruction became the center of the criminal investigation. Naker House was reviewed too. Xian did not enjoy that part, but he accepted it. Their methods had sometimes been aggressive, and he wanted the firm to survive without becoming another private power answerable only to itself. The review found no basis for Jayan's blackmail claims, but it forced Xian to clean up procedures he should have fixed earlier. Celine left the estate permanently. Her new apartment was smaller than any room Darien had ever given her and more peaceful than the entire Sornal property. She put an old photograph of Horan with both boys on the mantel where nobody could tell her to hide it. Riven moved nearby and returned to public life slowly. Xian recovered a block of family shares that old trust documents and Darien's acknowledgement of paternity had kept out of his control. He did not become king of Sornal Group. He did not want to. He wanted the company unable to bury another life the way it had buried his father's name. Kalis Group acquired its own position during the restructuring. Urin could have joined his voting rights with Xian's and become the strongest power on the new board. Instead, he sent documents permanently separating their authority. Xian went to his office with the papers in hand. This time he used the door. You gave up control, he said. Urin looked up. I never had yours. You could have. That's different. You spent 2 years investigating this company. I wanted the fraud stopped. Xian tapped the documents. You don't want leverage? Urin's gaze held his. Over Sornal? Plenty. Over you? No. He leaned back. I wanted a partner, Sien. Not an acquisition. Sien crossed the desk, caught his tie, and kissed him before Yurin could look too pleased with himself. Naker House changed after the case. Sien kept the investigation work but registered it under stricter oversight and expanded the negotiation side. They helped whistleblowers, smaller companies trapped in predatory deals, and ordinary people facing institutions too powerful to challenge alone. Revenge stopped being the reason the office opened every morning. Months passed. The temporary bond between Sien and Yurin faded naturally, exactly as intended. Their relationship did not. They kept separate companies, argued over strategy, stole each other's chargers, and continued playing chess whenever one of them needed to prove a point. Yurin still remembered Sien's bitter tea. Sien still pretended that did not affect him. 8 months after Founders' Night, Sien arrived at Yurin's apartment with a folder. Yurin eyed it. If that's another board proposal, I'm leaving. Your own apartment? I'll improvise. Sien opened the folder. Inside was an appointment confirmation from a private bonding clinic. Yurin read it twice and looked up. For once, the alpha who always had an answer had none. Sien folded his arms. You can say something. Yurin looked back at the page. I'm trying very hard not to make you change your mind. Sien smiled. This decision felt nothing like the temporary bond they had chosen while revenge was still active. There was no crisis pushing him forward, no family war, no biological accident. He was choosing it because the man in front of him had learned when to help, when to challenge him, and when to stand aside. A week later, they visited the memorial installed for the warehouse victims. Horan's name was engraved among the people who had died saving others. For years, the Sornals had reduced him to an unfortunate worker in the wrong place. Now the public record said what he had actually done. Sien touched the name once. We got it back, he said. He did not mean the shares. Yurin stood beside him, not ahead of him. When Sien held out his hand, Yurin took it, and they walked away together. Thank you so much for watching and staying with me through this story. If you enjoyed the chemistry, rivalry, revenge, and slow burn relationship between these two, there is a longer and more complete version available on my Patreon. The Patreon version includes extra scenes, more character development, extended chemistry, deeper emotional moments, and the full uncensored 18+ intimacy and bonding scenes that cannot be shown here on YouTube. If you'd like to experience the complete version and support the channel, you can find the Patreon link in the description below. Thank you again for watching, commenting, and supporting my stories. See you in the next one.